Okay, so we are not live. This is going to be pre-recorded stream, so by the time this is posted, we will already be gone. But I'm here with Makitin, and we're going to talk a little bit about social media and the way people like to make inflammatory posts calling people out, and then when it backfires on them, they have the nerve to act like they're the victim in the situation. And as a springboard to that, there's a particular situation that sort of inspired this discussion that I'm going to recap for us real quick here. So there's an artist on Twitter. You can clearly see her name there. Her name's not important though, but it is comical. She made a post on her account where she said something to the effect of the Ghost in the Shell movie is not whitewashing. And someone that she followed and that followed her retweeted that on their account, quoting that tweet, and said something to the effect of, "This is the most ignorant thing I've ever read." And then the artist replies with, "What?" So the other girl says, "I'm not even going to explain your own ignorance to you." So I guess you may have heard of him, a YouTuber by the name of Sky Williams. He jumped in the conversation because I guess he's friends with the artist. And he said, he kind of went off and blew up on this girl and called her out for, being like, how are you going to call somebody ignorant and then not even explain?
I suppose now would be a bad time to mention that there seems to be a reason why we can't just go and look through the exchange.
Yes, because at this point, all the tweets are now protected on the account of the artist who decided to make the call out post. So what ended up happening was that girl, the Irene here that I just showed you the account of, she blocked Sky without responding to him, basically. And then, so I guess he got fired up and made a rant or two on a video on his account, basically saying he was calling out her behavior. He used some insults, called her a bitch, called her a cunt. But that's just kind of the way he talks. It wasn't necessarily, you're a woman, so I'm calling you this. Of course, that's the way everybody's going to interpret it. But that aside, kind of turned into a big mess on Twitter where people were saying, oh, you are driving your following toward her. And I mean, right here on the screen, you see somebody says, oh, and unsubbed, setting up a dog pile of harassment, whining like a baby, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing that amazes
The irony, given that she has blocked her tweets.
Right. So the thing is that she went out of her way in public to retweet someone, present that to all her followers, call somebody ignorant, tell them, then proceed to tell them, oh, I'm not even going to tell you why I think you're an ignorant person. And somehow that's not calling, a situation where dogpiling may happen, regardless of you want to say, oh, well, his following is much larger than her following. I mean, it's still a significant amount of people. It's like 14,000 or something like that. So I don't really understand what the number is where it becomes a problem for someone to voice their opinions or call other people out for their behavior. Why is it okay for her to randomly call somebody ignorant, but it's not okay for somebody to come back at her and be like, well, at the very least, you should tell this person why you're saying this?
The other problem that I have with this is that it looks like these are the same people who would also complain that if somebody else decided to jump into a conversation that had nothing to do with them on a public place like Twitter without provocation, that they would complain that, oh, how dare you be on a woman's mentions? If the roles were reversed, that would be the exact same thing that I see going on there. And then to go claim that he's whining like a baby when she's the one protecting and blocking her tweets on top, and then add to that the fact that she did the most passive aggressive act you can do on Twitter, which is basically subtweeting and then complaining that she gets some kind of reprisal from it from somebody who's bigger. I mean, that's isn't that the whole motivation behind her subtweeting in the first place, is that she's hoping to get people to dogpile on her. And yeah, like you said, sure, you can say that, well, he has a bigger following or not, but if you're not willing to back up or substantiate what you say with either uh, being being steadfast in your opinions um, or sticking to your guns, then you shouldn't do it.
Right. And I guess what really bothers me is the hypocrisy. It's like, how is that fair to say that somebody has to remain silent? And the amazing thing is, I don't even want to go into this territory, but it's almost like they're forcing us to, because let me see, I've got another one here where, oh, I can't pull it up on the screen. Let me see if I can adjust it. Where they bring identity into the mix, of course. I'll just have to share my entire screen. I don't think I have anything that would risk my privacy, so that's fine. All right. Well, I guess I'm having some kind of screen inception. I don't know if that's actually happening on the window, though. I'm just going to have to hope it's not and read this out. So somebody jumps in and says, making a good minute video using slurs on a woman like that sure shows a lot about the respect you hold for people. Statement. It's hard to say which order this goes in because it's Twitter. I don't know if it goes up or down, but it brings into it, for the record, shit talking and spending a good video about it on a queer Asian woman who obviously has every right to be mad at a person claiming that whitewashing isn't a problem is kind of a dick move, especially when no one is technically obligated to explain their irritation for your ignorance on a matter. Now, that's the part that really drives me crazy. Not only are they bringing identity into it, oh, queer Asian woman, well, who cares? He's a gay black man, if you want to go that route. I mean, who's more oppressed? It doesn't make any sense. It shouldn't matter. It's not about who the words are coming from. It's about what the words are. The other thing is this last part where it's like, oh, technically no one is obligated. Well, yes, you're right. No one is obligated to have a conversation. And I've seen so many tweets like that where they're telling him, oh, Sky, nobody owes you a conversation. Well, if no one owes you a conversation, why are you starting a conversation?
Because that is the recurring talking point that they're using. And so they have to constantly, I mean, any time that there's any kind of social activity or any kind of social issue and they want to drive it home as much as they can, they always say, well, our goal is to have a conversation. So to them, that's okay. But because this person is doing something they don't like, they don't bother to go and investigate whether or not this person is equally oppressed or not. And so at that point, it really becomes oh, you're attacking somebody who I think should be protected for whatever reason, which it's kind of immaterial to this, but who cares about this? This is a non-issue in Ghost in the Shell anyway. And for one, unless she's Japanese specifically, no, she really doesn't have any obligation to feel offended. Nobody really ever does. But
her last name appears to be Ko. I don't think she's Japanese.
Just gonna go out on a limb there, and even if by some chance that was a Japanese last name, she's not Japanese in nationality, which is really where this should really boil down to. This is
right.
a nationality issue and not a racial one, because these people don't have they're not well researched enough to even understand the ethnic differences between a Chinese and a Japanese person. But a Japanese person can absolutely point out who's actually ethnically Japanese and who isn't.
Right. And I'm not going to read out the post, but the artist that made that original tweet that got called out, she clarified her position, what she was talking about when she made the Ghost in the Shell tweet, and it was kind of along the lines of what you were just saying. And honestly, I think it's stupid to be like, when these people complain like, oh, Asian people don't get proper representation in movies or whatever. It's like, so first of all, if somebody else had come along and says, oh, just throw any old Asian person in the role, they're all the same, that would be a racist thing to say, according to some of these people. So why is it okay to do if you just want to throw someone in the role for representation's sake? Like, that's the good kind of racism? It's only good when it benefits you? It doesn't add up. But I mean, that's kind of a different.
Well, also consider the fact that this is ignoring an entire continent's worth of entertainment. It's saying, oh, all the representation you get in Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Indonesian, Thai, or Thai, Cambodian, if ever such a thing existed. All those films from all of those areas somehow are no longer applicable because, I mean, I don't know, but I don't remember anybody in Japan complaining that the Thai live action iteration of Dragon Ball was something to abhor for the simple fact of they didn't show actual Japanese people.
Yep, and I mean, I don't see anybody complaining that the Japanese Attack on Titan movie has stars only Asian people when the actual canon of the series, they're more European, and the Asian people are basically extinct in that world.
And I want to say I don't remember if it was a movie or an anime or something, but there was one where I think they wanted to. It was a Japanese. Obviously, if it was anime, it was Japanese. But it was based on a kind of a fictional representation of Brazil because everything was very Portuguese looking,
Oh, I know
uh,
what you're talking about.
and therefore, that should be something that I would think that wouldn't that be just as applicable because now they're if you understand the history of Brazil, which they don't, you could be doing lots of cultural appropriation that way, especially given the fact that when they were advertising for the Japanese people to come to Brazil in the early 20th century, and those people that stayed behind tried to go back to Japan, they looked at them as lesser human beings because they weren't Japanese anymore.
Boy, it's almost like that can happen no matter where you're from. I think what really truly bothers me about this is just it's like the attitude on social media in general, and then how these people also want to have their so-called safe space. They want all the freedom to say whatever it is they want on a public forum, but none of the responsibility for their words.
Right. They want to be able to do everything, but they want to do it without consequence, which is not it's not realistic because once again, if the tables were turned, if it was somebody making there's plenty of that in the news right now, somebody going and making some defamatory comment against the LGBT community in an area that's not in exactly public but not exactly private either, and these people these people will jump on it quicker than Movie Bob on a $30 burrito. I mean,
They'll take your whole life down because you will lose your job, you will lose friends. It's insane. So, but I guess what the difference in their mind is that they think that they have the just correct mindset, and what they're doing is different because they're right, and it's for the greater good. But really, they're creating the very situations that they are complaining about. I mean, you would have your safe space all the time if you were nice to people. I mean, the only way you're going to get a true safe space is, let's see, you put your account on private, which they did, and then you only follow and only allow people that to follow you that agree with you on all things.
But that's never going to be truly a safe space, because if it's, as much as I don't want to tear open old wounds for those that really find this to be an issue, but regardless of which side you're on, the election, if you accept the hypothesis that this was a leak from some disgruntled Democratic support or Democrats, then you should be very well aware of the fact that a private company can just the same have people that are given full permission to go in and look at whomever's tweets they want to look at and leak those tweets, regardless of if they're private or not. It's not like there's somebody could do this, but they would, I don't think Twitter does, where they could encrypt the messages and everything like that. But the only way that you could do that is you'd have to be given the ability to do that, which Twitter doesn't. So that means that even when it's protected, you're not protected against somebody within the company doing something. And if anybody should be more in tune with the fact that a business can do this, it should be them, because they've seen it happen in their favor on Twitter already. They've seen, what was it, Jack Dorsey and whoever else. They've seen them create these algorithms to get rid of people that they don't like. They can do whatever they want. So you protecting it and making it your safe space, okay, yeah, until somebody decides that they don't like what you have to say, and they might get paid a hefty sum of money by, say, Gawker or somebody like that to go to leak that information to them. And then all of a sudden, what was your safe space now is now looking like incriminating evidence. I mean, we all saw that in Gamergate with the pseudo private what was it, journalism Google group or whatever it was.
Yeah. Let's see. There's a couple other replies. Okay, so the other thing that people are taking issue with is the fact that he used slurs in his response. So let's see. This person I'm going to read out real quick. Cunt is a slur. Don't understand how that's confusing. He called a woman a cunt 12 times because he felt he should go aggro over something she didn't do to his demands, which makes no sense. He didn't demand anything. It doesn't matter what gender they were being a cunt. So he replies, tool, asshole, fuck, stick, shit heel, all insults that don't carry gendered connotations. Tell me how, explain to me, how is it better to call someone any of these things just because it doesn't have a gendered connotation, as if that somehow makes it worse? I mean, how is it a good thing to be called anything, and then thus ignoring the whole point of an insult to make someone feel bad?
Yeah, since when are we policing how people deride each other?
It's insanity. And the thing that bothers me about it is that we're using this idea of these like safe spaces and identities where people need to be protected for who they are, but it's creating these situations where people will go out and do whatever it is they want and say whatever it is they want because they know they can fall back on that identity and be like, oh, well, they're just picking on me because this. And then the other person automatically, in the eyes of society, loses the argument because they're now looked at as some sort of bigot who's only doing this because they hate women or they hate queer people or they hate whatever other identity you want to throw into the list. And this is not the first instance that this has happened with this particular person. I can't go back through all of his tweet replies to find it at the moment, but I will link in the description the stream which he talks about it on. Basically, what happened is there was a situation where he had words with somebody that was transgender, and the transgender person said in response to something Sky Williams said about the Black Lives Matter movement. They said, the trans person says, I am all for BLM, but I wouldn't mind Sky Williams getting some police brutality. And so his response to that person was, gee, I thought that you being transgender, you would have an understanding of why, why it's wrong to do something like that. And then, and he's like, no, you're just a cunt. So, like I said, it's a favorite insult of his. And then what happens is one of the first replies is somebody jumps into that conversation and says, why are you harassing a trans person? And then the trans person tweets back and says, why are you insulting me, you nigger? No joke. Like, this is a real thing that actually happened. And I can't understand how you can have that attitude and be like, I'm for social justice. I'm for defending these groups. And then as soon as the gloves come off, you show your true hand and you prove you're not about that stuff at all. You just want to carry around your victim card so that you can say, I'm this, therefore you can't do anything to me, but I can do anything to you.
Right. I mean, they want to carry this attitude that they are persona non grata, and therefore whatever they do is just they're constantly abused. And like I said, any other way it would turn into, how dare you get into a WOC or trans person of colors mentions or something like that, as though somehow these are so coveted and so specific that there's a social hierarchy of who is permitted and who is not permitted to interact in something that is open to everybody.
And they've created that hierarchy, and the ironic part is they're at the top because they have the freedom to do whatever they want, and then all they have to do is turn around and say racist, transphobe, sexist, misogynist, something along those lines, and that other person, they're instantly labeled so that the context of the argument itself doesn't matter anymore. All that matters is that person has now been labeled as that thing, so therefore they are that thing, and the person with the protected identity is automatically in the correct spot, and they need protection from the horrible, terrible, bigoted individual who called them out on their crap. And I think that is the most manipulative, underhanded behavior I've ever seen in my life, because like I said, they go out of their way to be inflammatory to people, and then they have the nerve to try to make people feel guilty for calling them out. It's like the perfect bullying system.
I read something that I don't completely agree with, but it said one of the problems or one of the concerns with social media compared to traditional media, i.e. newspapers and magazines, is that there used to serve as a filter. And so whenever somebody posted something, there was supposed to be a process of ensuring veracity of whatever they said. So you couldn't just go out and do character assassination without actually having something to back it up. Whether it was planted or not is not the point at the moment. But you couldn't just go and say somebody was something and then walk away. That would never work. You had to say this person is this, and here's something that they said and did. With the problem with social media is it's purely a rhetorical platform. So all somebody has to do is go to social media and say this person is this. It doesn't matter. And the problem is that you can say something over and over and over, and even if people didn't believe it before, eventually they'll start believing it, and that's a serious problem. I mean, it's bad. We kind of already dealt with it when in the realm of politics, because mudslinging's always been around, but it gets even worse when now you're doing it to individuals, because you'll have those people that will always hide behind the badge of, well, this is freedom of speech and we can do whatever, which is neither the spirit nor the intent of the First Amendment anyway. And so they'll use that as their security blanket. But then you also have the other problem of that people can't filter stuff out anymore. So if somebody says something, it becomes a game of who said it first. And I've had this even in the videos that I've made, or even in comment sections I've been part of. It's all about who says something first, and then that's what that person is.
Right.
If
And
that person says something first and they have the leverage, the pool, they're a better rhetorician than the other person they're talking to, then it works. And I don't mean better rhetorician in the sense that they're even good and they understand how to make convincing and compelling arguments. I mean, they just have to know a certain technique or certain act that they know will get a lot of attention and will get some idiot to buy into it.
right. And it also kind of plays into the attitude in society in general, where now people want to try so hard to be, in spite of all they complain about oppression and whatnot, people want to try so hard to be supportive of these so-called identities, to be seen as a good person, that they will bend over backwards to do it and ignore the context of the situation just to defend that person that they feel is more oppressed or whatever. And one more message that I wanted to look at in particular here, it kind of goes back to the follower count, but it also goes to how social media is taken so seriously now, and like the fear mongering, putting this idea out there. Dude, you got 500,000 followers. Targeting a single user like that puts her in danger. Delete video now. First of all, targeting, really? I mean, it's not like there's a sniper aiming at her. It's a response to a message that she posted on a public space. How does that put her in danger? You can say, oh, well, maybe there's 3,000 people calling her an idiot. Well, so what? You have the ability to ignore that. Clearly she did, because she was actively blocking people and put her account on private.
Which is pretty much the standard operating procedure for these people anyway. And
I mean, speaking of standard, just looking at this guy, you know that he's just one of those tryhards that does this kind of stuff and buys into the crap. I know I'm using appearances, but almost every time I encounter somebody like this, it's either they're overweight and bald, or they've got the problematic glasses.
And they're probably the type of person that would give consent to filming somebody else other than themselves and then complain about a shirt that they're wearing.
I think that basically covers everything. It's just mind-blowing to me when things like this happen. I mean, this particular situation ended up where he started to acknowledge his own personal issues, and he's going to go see a psychologist. And I mean, that's great for him, but I feel like a lot of people were basically just trying to convince him, like, oh, what you did was problematic, and here's why, and you were shaming a woman and all that. And it's like, that's not even what this was about, but they twist it so that you feel bad as a person and feel like you need to correct your behavior. And it's just more manipulation that I don't think people should stand for, and I don't think that people should apologize for. I mean, if the girl apologized for overreacting, me like, you're ignorant and whatnot, then maybe everybody could apologize to each other and resolve the situation like adults. But I don't see something like that happening, because it's never about coming to an understanding. It's always about tweeting to your followers to show them how into social justice you are, and how you're sticking up for the little guy, or how you are the little guy and you're speaking out and you're not going to take it anymore.
Right, the virtual virtue signaling, as they call it.
Yeah, virtual showboating.
And I even saw something. It's related. Doesn't exactly go here, but I'm going to connect the dots anyway. But she was talking about and this is a good friend. I criticized that, but still a friend. And she was posting something on Facebook, I think it was. It's basically where where she's I forget what the word, she's being incredulous and bemused about the cliche articles where they're like, oh, millennials and whatever the generation after millennials wants to be called. They apparently they want to be called founders, which I find ironic because the only thing they've been able to find from what I've seen is the nearest trash heap full of Justin Bieber CDs. But all of that aside, they were saying that, oh, all they like to do is spend time on their phone and on social networks and all. And the whole point that she was trying to make was that, well, yeah, we do that a lot more than you actually see us socializing, but in public or face to face. But guess what? We're talking to people, so you can't criticize us and say that we're not going out there talking to people, because us being on social media is talking to people. And in fact, because of that, we get to talk to people from all over the country and all over the world, which for the record, people were doing in the past. But yes, you get to do it instantly versus the old days of pen pals where you had to wait weeks and months to get a response.
Yeah.
And so she gets frustrated, basically saying that, well, what do you think we're doing? We're socializing and we're doing this. So, we're not wasting our time, or we're not less social because we spend more time on our phones. We're actually socializing. And so you need to stop saying all of these things about us. But one, it's a completely different type of socializing. When you're socializing in public in a group, and I this is my observation, people, as you've acknowledged, they don't want, they're less likely to be aggressive when they're in public, which means that they'll change their mind. You'll see the people who really change their opinions the minute somebody says something, and says something to them. Every their opinions based on the last person they talked to. And so these people would otherwise, who on social media anyway, would constantly, like you said, be talking to their followers because it's so much about them and virtue signaling, would be shut up immediately if they were in a public place, because they wouldn't have anything to back it up with. The problem is that now when you go into these discussions, you have the opportunity to go and look up whatever you want to look up online, and that makes it more convenient and easier to look like you're a big tough guy, because you can go around throwing nonsense like logical informal fallacies around, or you can go and say you can play the identity politics game. But when you're in person, you're face to face, my observation is that you understand social cues, and you're not going to be defensive, and you just might pick something up that you didn't otherwise think you would. And irony of ironies, one of the very upstanding media outlets known as National Public Radio, I think it was maybe 2.5 years ago, they had a segment where they said that it's basically not a good idea to have friends who have the same opinions that you have or beliefs that you have, because then you'll never get it challenged. And so it's if you want to expand your thoughts process and everything like that, it's a good idea to have friends that have different opinions on things. And yet, one, these people don't do it because they're asking for a safe space. Two, they are doing it mostly online. So when they do go into public, more or less, they probably are talking to people that are locally, that they know through social media, or they spend a lot of time with. So they think the way that they think. So they are never going to encounter that opportunity. And now, if they do, you have people like, what is that AIDS Skrillex guy or whatever it was.
Yeah.
All they do now is they just yell at people.
Yep. And I mean, online versus real life, there's obviously differences in the sense that, like you were saying, you can keep yourself around people that just agree with you, And then when you come across someone that doesn't, rather than engaging with them, you can just say block because, oh, this person said something I didn't like. I'm not even going to talk about it. I'm not going to, even consider my position might be wrong. I'm going to block, even if the post that they made is not inflammatory in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's a huge problem in teaching people about how to have a proper discussion and how to learn things. I mean, I fully admit that it's difficult to change your mind on something, but the more you close yourself off to everybody that doesn't think like you, the harder a time you're going to have of not only defending your points, but just growing as an individual, because not everybody is going to agree with you all the time.
And and that's a big problem to me because I feel that I never really, I don't think anybody was really ever taught how to have a conversation, let alone a difficult one. And so when you think about all the public service announcements and after school specials and all the stuff that I learned in school, you know, they said these things, they didn't practice them because at the time the idea was that, if I can use political terms, is that you should, being liberal is a good idea. That's what you should do, and that's what you should be, and you should think in a way, because when you're liberal, I mean, just think about the terminology itself. Everything to me is always an issue of language. So think of the term itself. Liberal, well, that means you're free and you're, and everything is open, and so then you have open-mindedness, and so the idea is that that's the right thing to do because, oh well, now when you're open, then you can have differing opinions and ideologies come to you and you can change your opinion. But that's a very limited, it's usually a very limited perspective that they have on it. It's only in as much as, well, maybe when they grew up they didn't know a trans person, but the minute they hit college they did, which is not diversity of thought. That's diversity of appearance. That's a different perspective. And indeed it is a different perspective, or a different perspective rather, of a individual, but that doesn't imply diversity of thought. That doesn't automatically mean that the perspective of thought is going to be different. It just means that the person looks different and maybe might see something a little bit different. But I mean, at the same time, now you have to play the game of, well, okay, but how many times is it going to be purely self-interest? Because when people talk about, what's the buzzword they use, representation,
Yep.
it's always, it's a little game that I like to play, where if I don't know, if, like, say I don't know if somebody is black or Latino or Asian or they're LGBT or anything like that, and I just read something that, I maybe read a profile or read maybe some of the things that they're doing, and if I see that, oh, they like to write about, uh, what are the projects they call, like, the queer people or something like that. That's what they like to say.
Yeah.
Uh, I just go and I look at these things. So even if somebody's just big about talking about cancer, do they have cancer? And that's it's a good thing to raise a awareness to some of these things, if you can do it so that some change actually happens. But the problem I see is that we've gone to the point where now people are doing it purely out of self-interest. If I
Right.
wanted to go and do something for that's related to Black Americans, it's only going to look like it's because of that. And so, but if I wanted to go help women, then maybe that doesn't look so self-interest. Although, based on what I'm trying to do currently in my life right now, I would argue that doing things for women is more about self-interest than anything else. But the problem is that you can't get to the point anymore where somebody does something purely, where you where everything is an equal playing field. Somebody does something because they care about it. It's simply because, oh, I'm queer, so I need to see other queer people. And it probably is a good idea if other queer people are representing other queer people. And then you have the same thing with, oh well, yeah, we I care about I care about Black Lives Matter, but it's really only because I have some kind of personal involvement with it. If and to me that's a problem, because that attitude to me is what leads to this whole virtue signaling. I have to let everybody know how good of a person I
Right.
am.
They're not doing it. They're not doing it for to actually make a world change. It's more of to be seen as a hero and somebody that's um, doing good things for the world and fighting those evil bigots, as they put it.
Right. And the reason I brought this up, or the reason it bothers me the most, is because a lot of times I see people that do these things, they're compelled to do it when it suits them. For one, that's a given. But then the other problem is that if maybe they had, let's say that person either had a lot of a big reputation or had lots of money or something, and they only decided when it became a problem that affected them that they needed to contribute to it. Oh well, I think transgender suicide is a problem. Oh well, I'm trans, but now that I have a now that or I have a lot of money, but now that I decided I'm trans, I'm going to contribute to these groups now. And so it changes from, hey, suicide, the way I look at it is suicide is a problem, and so let's help out and trying to prevent suicides. Whereas when somebody does something like that, it's like, oh, look, now that I'm this, I'm representing something, and I'm representing all of these ideas, and look, it's all about me at that point. It's not about the issue.
Yeah, I think it really all boils down to the way that social media has made people think that we have to care about what they do 24 hours a day at all times a day. And I mean, I don't see that changing anytime soon. But to wrap up this particular discussion, I just personally find it to be very disingenuous. There's a lot of double standards that I disagree with for all of the reasons that we pointed out here, and I find it to be the ultimate form of bullying, because not only do they get to play the bully, but afterwards they get to play the person that requires sympathy and defense too. But here's the problem, and it was demonstrated in this situation. When you're the big kid on the playground and you're pushing everybody else around, it's only a matter of time before a bigger kid moves into the neighborhood and knocks you on your ass. So there's that. And I think these people are, the more they do this, the more they're going to start to see that nobody's just going to sit around and stand for it forever. And that's what they need. And eventually, I think maybe there's some hope that
Uh,
people will be taught a lesson. But until they get past this argument winning situation where you could just call someone a name and that automatically labels them as the person that's incorrect, that's just not going to happen.
well, even though it's not really part of this, it was part of research I did for a video I will one of these days do about logical fallacies. And I remember somebody making the a point or the opinion that, basically saying that the way that people use fallacies, if you can imagine that, they abuse the system, and it's all about trying to be right, and therefore they're using it just to say, oh, this person used it, so that person doesn't have an argument anymore. They were basically saying that that's not the purpose of it. The purpose is so that you can present the truth, that people understand what the truth is. But this is clear. This is clearly what this is all about. This is the exact same situation. It's about who can be right, and the truth is immaterial. If the truth can help them, then sure, they'll mention it. but they'll only mention it to whatever point they want to mention it. When it becomes something that doesn't help their case, then they don't care about it. But otherwise, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. And it matters, feelings are the only thing that matters. And people can argue that we should just, there should be no limbic system at all. But the fact of the matter is that we have the limbic part of our brain, and you're not going to get rid of that. So you can say whatever you want to say about the problems and failures of it, but until you get rid of it, which hopefully is never, you're going to have to deal with the fact that emotions are going to play in as part of it. But emotions in this case should not prevent you from understanding the reality of the matter, or looking at it. But the problem is that people don't want to do that. And I don't think that social media has created the problem. I will say that I think traditional media really is the one that has made this an issue. And then social media really just knocked it out of the park at that point, because with traditional media, I mean, you still have the same thing. Somebody said something and it's completely blown out of proportion, or they say something and it just goes way too far. And then everybody, it immediately turns into the angry mob with their pitchforks in hand, going down, looking for some blood to shed. And that never works out. As somebody in the Black community, there are plenty of instances in Black American history where that angry mob mentality didn't work. And so it's probably not a good idea for those of you that now want to claim that you're supporting people of color to continue that, because now all you're doing is you're carrying the pitchforks, but guess what? You're still going to trample over innocent people that you're going to end up getting hurt or killed, or you're still going to end up being an idiot that doesn't know what you're talking about, which is what happens. And I think social media has only made that worse by the fact that everything now is instant. So it used to be there was a point where you had some, even when it was really just MySpace. So even 10 years ago, there was still some period where of processing something, where somebody can formulate an opinion. That's not there anymore. And what bothers me is that it seems like otherwise, who should be otherwise intelligent or knowledgeable people don't get this. I mean, it's one thing to have some no-name artist complain about it that we've never heard of, and goes and goes and cries and runs off somewhere and locks their Twitter account. But when you have public figures and celebrities, and worst of all, professors and teachers doing this, that's a big problem. And to me, that shows that the problem was really there to begin. It was always there to begin with. And now, because of social media, we're only seeing the side effects of it. But but now you have the issue of, well, do I double down and go that route, or do I absolutely reject it?
I mean, there's probably a middle ground somewhere, but
as you know, apparently the middle ground means you're pompous and
neutral, just trying to be right, which,
yeah.
I mean, if you want to call me right, I'll take it. All right, so I think that's good for this episode. It went on for a little bit longer than I thought, but it still turned out pretty good, I think. We'll be back.
Still under an hour, wasn't it?
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be back next time. Thanks for listening.
Take care.